Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming here tonight to talk about our high-risk sports here at Rhinebeck. The high-risk sports that we have here are football and cheer and volleyball. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Lutinsky, who's going to give us some information. Thank you.
Thank you, President Rubin. And I want to thank our parents for joining us, our parents that are here in person and our parents at home. Tonight, we're joined by our entire Board of Education, plus our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Mrs. Corinne Ryan, and our Athletic Director, Mr. Joe Seglia. And the reason we're having a meeting is because we have a very specific group to talk about, so-called high-risk sports. For the fall season at Rhinebeck specifically, that's, as President Rubin said, cheerleading, football, and volleyball. These are designations by the New York State Department of Health. They're not recent either. These are kind of, in terms of our COVID timeline, these are old designations, and they're really based on the ability to maintain physical distance and shared equipment. Now, obviously, that's a great debate and a great discussion about what the differences and similarities between volleyball versus cheerleading versus football in terms of how close the athletes are and touching shared equipment. But that's their designation. So what we have are a set of guidelines, predominantly the CDC and the New York State Department of Education. So the New York State Department of Education, or SED, is directly following the CDC guidelines. So in the CDC guidelines, it talks about community transmission rates, because how you react to things, whether it's hybrid instruction, full remote instruction, or having all your kids in school, has a lot to do with what your community transmission is. Sports is the same way. So for high-risk communities or high transmission areas, they go by two different things. They go by number of new cases per 100,000 people, and they go with your positivity rate amongst your tests. We are a high transmission in the first. We are a low transmission in the second, but by their metric, tie goes to the first. So because of the numbers in Westchester, Westchester is a high transmission area. So for a high transmission area, what the CDC and SED say, now I'm going to say this out loud and it's going to sound odd, but what they suggest is for high risk sports in high transmission rate areas, you either virtual, I don't know how you do virtual cheerleading or virtual football, but they actually have that in writing. That's one of the choices. Or everyone on the team should be vaccinated. Or, number 3, you cancel the season. So what SED says is virtual, all vaxxed, or you cancel the season. So here's why we need your help. We absolutely do not want to cancel any seasons. I think the idea of virtual, I don't know if they're talking about Zoom or Madden or what kind of virtual they're talking about, but that's silly to me. We need to have for their mental health and physical health, we need to have our kids participating in all the things that they like to do. So we're interested in running our sports, but we're also interested in keeping our children healthy. That's the number one thing we need to do, and that's why we need your help. So first of all, we're conscious of the potential of one of our children getting seriously ill. And we were lucky last year. We ran a tight ship in terms of adhering to our protocols, and we were rewarded, and as late as yesterday, Dr. Shirlita Amler, the Westchester County Commissioner for Health, again, as she has done multiple times, lauded and praised our schools for maintaining such good environments for their students and student athletes. So, first of all, we're very conscious of our students' health. There's really nothing more important than that. However, I have now twice publicly made a statement based on the Lower Hudson Council of School Superintendents, which promote vaccinations amongst our athletes. So the lack of vaccination results in quarantine, because if you're vaccinated and you're exposed, you don't have to quarantine. If you're not vaccinated and you're exposed, you'll have to quarantine. So the quarantine, again, the health of the children and the health of the student athletes is primary. But in terms of us playing sports, quarantines are going to take the athlete off the field in the same way that, if you were unlucky enough to have a child quarantined last year. I know many families had children quarantined multiple times. Okay? Number one, it takes the athlete off the field, but in the right quantity, if we get enough of those students that are quarantined, that might mean we can't operate a team. If we don't have enough athletes, that right there could stop things. So therefore, what we want is our athletic Rhinebeck family to help us protect our kids' health, number one. Number two, help us make sure we can operate our games. Because like I said before, we really don't want to cancel things. So what we want is we want our high-risk athletes to do one of two things. The best way to protect the children, the best way to protect the teams and the seasons, is for everyone to get vaccinated. So one of the two things they could do is get vaccinated. Number one, that will insulate them from serious illness. It'll decrease their chance of getting sick, and if they do get sick, it'll decrease the severity for their health. For their playing time, it would keep them operational. For the team, it would mean the team could still play. So number one, I'll echo what the Lower Council of School Superintendents said. We want everyone to be vaccinated. However, if vaccination is not a medical option for your particular child, and what we know is this: we know that things are changing. We know that there's a vaccination coming out for lower and lower age groups. We know that the FDA is going to be changing the status of the vaccinations. Okay, so we'll roll with those things. But if for your child, vaccination is not an option right now, we need you to go and get regularly tested. One of two options. Either get vaccinated or regularly tested. And the regular testing is something that we would facilitate. The vaccinations, for that matter, we can facilitate. Right here today, actually in our library, we had day 2 of a Westchester County Department of Health vaccination clinic. So they came in here on August 11th, and they came into the library about 10 o'clock. They spent 2 hours setting up, and from noon to 4 o'clock, they ran a vaccination clinic. And it was open to, we put it out to our communities. We cooperated with our friends in Rye. We had families from Rye come over. Dose 2 was today. We can do that. We can get the Department of Health in here, and we can facilitate the vaccination process. As you know from last year, we also did the same thing with the testing. So if your child was one that got the nasal swabs from us last year, you know it was a simple process. So for example, at the middle school, high school, we did it in this very room. The students came in on a Monday morning. We had our school nurses, Nurse Abatantono, Nurse Barth, and Nurse Mahmood. They did the nasal swabs. walking in this door to leaving the door takes less than 20 minutes. And what we've also done is we've also taken advantage of a Westchester County Department of Health initiative to bring saliva-based testing into Rhinebeck. So what that means is that working with the Department of Health, they matched us up with Mount Sinai Hospital. Mount Sinai has a specific vendor they work with to conduct saliva-based testing, which is as simple as you picking up the kit, you go home, you put the sample in the cylinder, you come in the next day, drop it in the collection basket. Company comes, takes it to the lab, and in about a little over 24 hours, you get your test result. So the testing we can facilitate here. Again, two things, extremely important. Mostly, this is for the health of our kids. That's always going to be primary. However, we are conscious of the fact that our athletes, they have a lot going on, and sports means a great deal to a lot of them. It's a big part of their socialization, it's a big part of their mental health, and obviously their physical health. We want to keep our teams playing. So here's what we need. We need our Rhinebeck families to get together and have their children do one of those two things. Get vaccinated, or like I said, if that's not a medical option for your family right now, have the regular testing, which we will facilitate. At this stage, Mrs. Ryan and Mr. Seglia have their Chromebooks open, so if you have questions, and I should have mentioned this at the top, it wasn't our announcement, we have our Q&A at rhinebeck.org email. So it's capital Q, A-N-D, capital A, at rhinebeck.org. So they're taking, yes, yep. So they're monitoring the emails so we can read them. So while that's going on, I'd like to open up for questions for the parents that are here. Yes. Can I ask so if you could step to the podium, because there's a microphone there, that way the entire audience can hear.
Hi. So is it just the unvaccinated that are being tested weekly? Because we know that the vaccinated are also capable of spreading it and test positive for the virus. And it's just very unclear through the DOH, I've had multiple conversations this week with them, and the vaccinated can still be spreaders of the virus. So will they be tested too?
So I'm sorry. Okay. So the Department of Health program that I just outlined, it's two stages. The initial stage is called the gateway testing, and the idea is to get as close as to possible as everyone tested initially to get a baseline, and then weekly do 20% of the population. So for Rhinebeck, we have 1,500 students. The idea would be 300 students every week doing the saliva-based test. So obviously that's 20% of the total, because you're absolutely right. The vaccination is going to protect you. It may not show up. You may be asymptomatic, but you still might have it. So for the whole student body, that's the goal. Most immediately, though, for the athletes, to be able to play, we need the unvaccinated students to be tested.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Other questions from our studio audience?
Hi. So we're in the start of the fall season. It's on its way. When are they actually considered vaccinated? Once they get their second shot? Because the season's almost done at that point. There's probably, and they
So
just get tested in between. How does that work? If your kid is not vaccinated and then does go ahead and start this process, what does that look like?
Sure, good question. So the Department of Health guidance came out in mid-August. So had you ran out to get vaccinated directly after that, there still would not have been time for you to be fully vaccinated. So we understand that. So today, because it's immediate, we're here talking specifically to our fall high-risk parents in cheerleading, volleyball, and football. But we do have the rest of the year to consider. Now, optimistically, I would hope we're going to have a good handle on things. Our rates will go down, and things will get better. However, until that happens, I can't just assume that.
Right.
We still don't know what the full effects of the Delta variant are going to be. But we do have our winter athletics, and the winter athletics, obviously, it's all indoors.
Right.
So unlike the fall, where some of the sports are not classified as high risk, we do have the rest of the year to consider. So the more we can do right now, the better off we'll be for the whole.
So if you do go ahead and get your kid vaccinated now, get the first shot, they would have to continually be tested? They fall into that testing category?
Yes, until the
they get their
process is
second
complete.
shot?
Yeah, so the
Okay.
process is first dose. So let's say Pfizer, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And what we had here was the Pfizer. Because the Pfizer is 3 weeks between doses, the Moderna is 4. The fully vaccinated means first dose, plus the 3 weeks to get the second dose, plus 2 weeks for everything to kick in.
Okay.
At that time, you're considered fully vaccinated.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So
Sure.
until that time, if they have an exposure,
Yes.
they would have to quarantine because they would not be considered fully vaccinated
Yeah.
at that time. But I think what the goal is like we really want to have those that are vaccinated and those that are unvaccinated participating in high-risk sports to be tested like on a regular basis.
Okay.
So that way, that's the best way to keep the community at large safe for now.
Thank you.
Because we don't want to have virtual sports. I mean, that's not something that the board wants to support, and we definitely don't want to cancel sports either. So,
Yeah. And just, that's part of the contact tracing process. So when there is a case, and when we are on the phone with the Department of Health, they're going to want proof of vaccination. I can't just say, oh yeah, they're vaccinated. So they'll ask us a bunch of questions about showing proof, or if they're in process, when that'll be. But they're going to make the call as to whether the person is officially vaccinated or not. And then what we do is we go by their guidance. Other in-person questions?
in terms of that, is my mic on? I don't even know. Is it on, please? Thank you. Just in terms of being unvaccinated in general, not just related to sports specifically, but even within the classroom, if your child happens to be next to a COVID positive case, within the classroom, an unvaccinated kid will have to quarantine. So it's a way of sort of protecting them from not just missing out on the sport that they love to play, but also not missing out on school as well.
There's the exception rule now, so that's
Right.
not necessarily true. So if everybody within that area,
Right, the
the infected student and any of the students within 6 feet were wearing their masks properly in classrooms, there's no quarantine. So that's going to also reduce the number of quarantines within the buildings at this time,
Right.
if they're all wearing their masks correctly. So today, kids are back, the constant reminders how you wear your masks correctly. So it's safety, it's keeping everybody safe and keeping you out of quarantine as well.
But if you have a room of fully vaxxed people, it's a no-brainer. You
Right.
say everybody's fully vaxxed, there's no
There's
quarantine
no
within this
quarantine
room.
at all. Right, after we have the proof that you are fully vaccinated.
Proof of vaccination, correct.
We do have some questions.
Okay.
So the first one is, thank you, it's not really a question, it's a comment. Thank you, Dr. Lutinsky, completely agree with you. Our daughter is vaccinated, and we agree that having the kids vaccinated is the best way to go for the good of the kids and the community.
Thank you.
The next question is, what is the current rate of children vaccinated on the different teams? So we don't currently have that data, which we will have shortly because we're going to be asking all the athletes on the high-risk sports for proof of vaccination so that we can then start the testing process. So I guess we can share rates later on, but we can't do that now.
Yeah, part of the contact tracing process that we learned from last year, sometimes we get a case that we found out about at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we're all here, and we've got the computers, we've got the people we can ask, we can interview, who'd you eat lunch with. Sometimes we didn't find out until 9 o'clock at night. Much harder to contact trace. So if we have the vaccination status, if we get the proof beforehand, and we have that in a secure private database, then when the case comes in, we don't have to go chasing people down, and we can get everyone cleared much quicker.
Is there a limit on number of spectators per athlete that can attend home volleyball games, and what about away games?
We currently don't have a limit we don't put a quote on spectators per athlete, and that's been the trend across the region. I just was on an athletic director meeting earlier this evening with our conference, and people are just honoring mask wearing indoors for all volleyball attendance, and for those visitors will be in the visitor section, home fans will be in the home section, and we'll continue to social distance like we've done in the past. At our venue, if that requires us to open both sides of the bleachers, where in a typical volleyball match we have one side of the bleachers open, but last year during Fall 2 we actually opened both sides to accommodate extra space. We certainly will do that, but right now there is no limit other than a capacity of a gymnasium, but we don't intend on reaching that point. We haven't reached that point during a non-pandemic season.
The next question is, when does the weekly testing start? So we are going to start collecting vaccination status on all the athletes, and we will begin the testing. We're going to begin with the rapid test that we used last year. That's how we're going to start the process, so we can begin that next week. Once we're all set up with Mount Sinai, we'll then move over to that system. But we'll begin next week with the weekly testing.
Yeah, so it was today that Mrs. Ryan, Mrs. Mahar, our assistant superintendent for business, and I met with the representative from the vendor set up by Mount Sinai. So that was today. They're going to give us a lot of the documentation that we can then share with families, like the consent form, for example, and details about what kind of test you have. But in the meantime, we still have our stock of the Abbott Binax Now tests, which are the nasal swabs that we used last year.
And what I would ask is that you can actually start sending in your proof of vaccination now. You can send it directly to me, cryan@rhineach.org, and we're going to start that list as soon as we start getting it. Yep. If you can just send us a picture of the card, and then we can start checking off and going to see who needs to start with the testing. If you know that, obviously, if you're not fully vaccinated, if you can let us know that too, so we can start setting up our list for testing so we don't have to wait for everything.
I just wanted to ask, do you need just the front, or do you need front and back of card for proof? Sorry, I guess I was off. Do you need just a picture of the front of the card, or do you need a picture of the front and the back?
So it has
So just the front then?
The one that has the name and the
Okay.
dates on it.
Great, thank you.
There are no other questions here. Let me just refresh. Yep. Yep.
Every athlete, regardless of whether they're vaccinated or not, every parent will have to sign a consent that their child can be tested. Because we are going to need that so that even, whether it's the gateway testing or the 20% a week testing.
So, yeah, so well, first of all, for our testing, the one that we're going to put in the interim, we can send out our consent form that we had last year. For the gateway testing, they have their own consent forms.
Okay.
So we don't have
Every-
that
every student-
information yet.
Every eligible student in the district will get that.
We'll get it.
Correct. Yes, but if we're starting to get this quickly up and running,
Yeah.
I think we need to have the consent form be signed by every athlete's parent.
Agreed.
So that the team can continue to have a season. Correct?
Yeah.
All
if-
athletes, vaccinated and unvaccinated, to be signing the consent form.
We need all athletes to consent to testing.
Yes. So
Okay.
to reiterate two important things, I mean, this is what I think about what we went through last year. If you think about what we did, we closed schools because we were afraid about the health of our children. So we went as far as that. They were home for months on end. So we could do that if we needed to. But we figured out ways to keep them safe and get them in here. We had the hybrid, we had all the safety measures we have in place. So if we have to, we could cancel a sport if we had to. But we don't want to do that. So kind of like the hybrid and kind of like all the things that we did in school to make sure that they could come in here and get educated rather than canceling school, we want to do the exact same thing with our athletics. Because I think if you look back to last year and what we were able to collectively achieve in getting our kids back in, finishing the year strong, and then setting things up for a return this year, I think we can do the same thing with athletics. I would feel horribly, as a parent of children who both participated in high-risk sports. I know what this means for families. I know what this means for the kids. I know what it means for the school. So yes, if we had to, we could cancel a season because health is number one. But if we can work together and use this dual system of vaccinate or test regularly, then we can get this done.
We have a couple more questions.
Yep.
So somebody's asking, wouldn't you have that data on vaccinated students on the physicals that have been submitted in Family ID? It is on our daughter's physical that we updated. Not everybody. So if your doctor administered the immunization, it may be on their physical form, but a lot of people went into pharmacies and things, so it wouldn't be there. So we would really need the card to go ahead and check that information.
Yeah. 'Cause It's the only way for them at home to hear you.
Me again. What's the time frame after someone has tested positive for COVID that you can do a rapid or a PCR? Because there's still always a trace for a certain amount of time, and I don't know what that time is.
So last year, and we'll get the exact clarification, but last year, if you had tested positive, they recommended not getting another test for 90 days. I don't know if that's the same window, but we'll find that information out.
Okay, and I had one more question that I forgot, so I may be back up here again.
Okay, we have another question here, so I'll answer that one while you're getting that. What email address do we write to notify our child is not vaccinated at this point? You can still send it to me, cryan, R-Y-A-N, @rhineck.org.
Yes.
Please repeat the email address, cryan@rhineck.org.
The name it's Corinne Ryan. Corinne Ryan. So it's CRYAN @rhineck.org. And this is not the only opportunity to ask questions. So the Q&A at rhineck.org that Corinne's been reading off of is a tool we use for meetings like this. That goes into our inboxes as well. So if you think of a question tomorrow, for example, you can email it, but you can also email us. So whatever way you find most convenient to get your questions answered, whether it's the Q&A or pick up a phone and call, this is not your only opportunity to ask a question. So if you are talking with a friend and come up with something that you think that is new or that we haven't covered, please ask us.
Just to clarify, you'll be doing the rapid test until you're set up with the Mount Sinai system. And
So
then
the ma-
after that, you'll be doing a PCR.
Yeah,
Correct.
Yep.
Okay. Because based on my experience, they haven't even been doing the rapid tests right now because of the, all of the, what's the word I'm looking for? The results that weren't accurate. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I just wanted
Yeah,
to know.
and that's
Okay.
that's one of the reasons why we're excited about the transition.
Okay.
And like I said, we met with them today, and the next step is to get the proper paperwork from them to share with the families and get things rolling.
Okay. Thank you.
The info on the website as well.
Yep.
One of the questions on the email was, sorry, you're answering my questions as I'm typing.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yes.
So one of the things that you should be aware of by now is that we have a new website. So not only will we be using the website for information, you'll be getting weekly information from me. And until this is done, part of that weekly information is probably going to have some information about COVID. So this will be on there as well. So we'll be using active information being blasted out, plus information accessible on the website.
Another question? Thank you for handling the sensitive subject. Question, how many spectators are able to attend football as well?
Again, we don't have limitations on spectators for outdoor or indoor events, but indoor spectators will be required to wear masks and socially distance, and outdoor spectators will be asked to socially distance as well. And similar to the spring, those in the same household are obviously not subject to social distancing, and if people would like to wear a mask outdoors, they may, but they're not required to. But we ask that they do socially distance and enjoy the contests.
Yeah, and I think the questions about the fan participation, that's something we lost last year. But it's the same as our approach to getting the kids back in school. We don't have limits, but we also want to be responsible. So when we have everybody back, watching our games, I would really ask that we think about what we don't want is to bring everybody together and then have an outbreak amongst our fans, while we're trying to monitor our athletes. So if you do attend a game, which we want, please come, sit in the stands and watch volleyball, sit on the sidelines and cheer with our cheerleaders and watch our football players. But please spread out and please keep yourselves safe as well as our kids, because we have to do this responsibly.
Additionally, as far as football goes, right now there are a bunch of children quarantined. If the students who were not vaccinated had not been indoors together and were outside, then why are they quarantined? Just trying to understand the rules. Maybe they were indoors together, I don't know, just trying to understand. Even if they are outside, there's a common misconception that if you're outside, you don't have to quarantine. That is not true. If you're within the 6 feet when you're outside, you are still supposed to quarantine. However, it is safer to be outside. That's why we always say everybody should go outside. It's not just to avoid the quarantine, it's to keep people safe. In addition, because it is a high-risk sport, they're outside, they're not masked when they're outside playing. If they were within that 6 feet for over a period of time, they do have to quarantine, that's why.
Yeah, the one constant that we've had throughout has been the 6 feet for 10 or 15 minutes. If you're within that, you are a potential exposure. So when we went down from 6 feet to 3 feet in the classrooms, the 6 feet exposure zone did not change. And it's the same thing with outside. So as Mrs. Ryan said, outside you are much safer. But if you are within 6 feet of a infected person inside and within 6 feet of an infected person outside, we still have to contact trace you.
Will fully vaccinated players get tested weekly, or will they get tested one time initially? There's two parts to this question.
We would do it regularly.
Fully vaccinated players, we're going to test regularly too?
Yes.
Yeah.
If a fully vaccinated athlete tests positive for the virus, how long are they out? They are in isolation for 10 days if they have finished with their symptoms.
Could you repeat the last
If a
portion?
fully vaccinated athlete tests positive, how long are they out for?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same rule. So if you're infected, you're infected. So it's going to be what they call an isolation. So remember, if you're the infected person, you get isolated. If you're exposed to the infected person, you may be quarantined. So if you get it, you get it.
Hi, how many times a week will the child be tested? One time per week.
Yep.
So this is somebody asking about being able to get their child vaccinated before their 12th birthday if it's in a couple of weeks. We can't do that. Actually, on the August 11th walk-in clinic, we had somebody coming in. It was their 12th birthday, and he said, all I wanted to do for my birthday was get vaccinated. It was like perfect commercial. So it has to be on the child's 12th birthday. There's nothing we can do to help that. That's all I have right now.
That's it.
That's it? All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to share that information about the testing as soon as possible. Mr. Seglia will be communicating with his coaches so that his coaches are fully up to speed on what we're doing. We'll have information on the website, and like I said, you're going to be getting weekly information from me, and I will be sharing that with you as well. Like I said, if there are further questions after this, that's okay. Send them in anyway.
If you forget the email address and you're reviewing our COVID operation plan, I am the COVID coordinator, and my email address is listed a couple of times in the plan.
Yeah.
So if you forget, you can find it there.
Okay, we're good? All right, I want to thank our parents for
Thank
coming
you.
here tonight in the storm.
you.
I want to thank everybody at home for watching. And like I said, please communicate. We'll try to answer all of your questions as quickly and effectively as possible. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you.